all for joining me today. I'm super excited to chat with you and connect with you. I am a Feathr user and a huge Feathr advocate. So when Isa asked me to join her today, I was like, yes, absolutely. Um, I think one of the things that's really unique about Feathr is the opportunity to use the tool to be able to connect more and help people to understand who you are and get your mission out there. And that is so important right now when we're living through this connection recession time. And I think that the connection recession is a term that's been coined by this dynamic that's at play where technology is pulling more of our attention. We're living in an attention economy. And also, we have had this separation that was caused through COVID and pattern and lifestyle behaviors that have changed after the pandemic. So my name is Samantha Swaim. Like I said, I am a Feathr user and fan, but I am also a fundraising event expert. That's what I do. I've been in the sector for 28 years, producing fundraising events. And after 28 years and over 700 events, 750 events, we've learned that events are not the easiest way to raise money, but they are very valuable and they're great tools for being able to help us build community. So today we're going to talk about how events can be a part of that, how marketing can be a part of that, and kind of what the need is right now and the trends that we're seeing moving into 2026. Now I do a lot of coaching and educating and supporting folks around their fundraising events. And our mission at Swaim Strategies is to help make your fundraising easy and provide you lots of big impact tools for your fundraising events. We have lots of tools to help you do that. So we have our book where I'm a co-author of Planning a Successful Major Donor Event. We have our weekly podcast in which we have a lot of our Feathr partners join us there, and our conference coming up where Feathr will be joining us, a 2-day hybrid event where you can learn all about fundraising events. So we hope you'll tune in. Check us out at the Fundraising Elevator where we're all headed up. It's our weekly conversation with thought leaders in the space. So let's dive into this idea of the connection recession. There is a need in the world right now to figure out how we close the funding gap and how we continue to keep people engaged in our work. And as an event person, I am constantly diving into studying group dynamics, donor trends, social structures to better understand how and when events just make the most sense. And right now we're seeing that they are a critical piece of the puzzle. So let's look at kind of big picture first. We have this beautiful, really amazing map that was created or graphic that was created by the incredible team at the Better Fundraising Company and Jeff Brooks Fundraising that took a moment to look at big moments in history and how they impacted fundraising at the top of COVID to understand what to do in the time of a pandemic. And suddenly now, here at the end of 2025, especially in the US, not exclusively, but especially in the US, we are sitting back in this place where it's almost like we're back at the beginning of the pandemic, where there's a lot of unknowns, there's a lot of changes happening, and a lot of uncertainty. So let's take a look at this graph and what it means from a big picture, because I think it has a really strong call to action in it. First, you hit that moment where organizations have a message of crisis. Our funding is changing. We're losing federal grants. There's a shift in perception of need. That creates this kind of surge. Whenever you have this like emergency crisis moment, there's this surge of giving. People jump in to figure out how can I be a part of this solution. And then when they start to sort of think about maybe if this is going to impact them at all, they frequently pull back in their giving. And you see that surge slump into sort of a bit of a decline. Straight across there is this baseline giving number of if life was just normal every single day, this is what we could predict in our fundraising. But in that moment of crisis when we respond and then pull back to sort of assess our own stability, there is this slump that occurs that drops below the baseline. But if we keep fundraising, if we keep getting our message out, if we keep communicating, if we keep building community, that will come back and that will actually surge again and then flatten out, leaving the moment of crisis higher than it started. So the message in this at the time of the pandemic was don't stop fundraising, don't wait and see. And I want to encourage you to think about that now as we look at global wars, as we look at changes in politics and conversations about needs within our community, we are sitting in this sort of moment where I'm seeing a lot of organizations hit pause or wait and see. But I think it's important that we continue our conversations, we continue telling our story, we continue making asks, and we are in contact with people often and regularly so they understand what the needs of our organizations are and what the stability and long term of the organization is. But there's some other trends I think we should note for the year ahead, that we could start to build an idea of how do we bring more community together to our organization and create safety nets around our organization versus continuing to sort of just like hope and send messaging out to the world. So first, a couple of things that I want to be able to highlight. Individual giving is up. Major donors continue to increase their giving globally, although these numbers are coming from Giving USA. But we are seeing that year after year, we're seeing an increase of individual giving on the rise. And that is due to a lot of things. One, we've had digital giving has made things a lot easier to give. There is sort of a shift in thinking among younger donors who are really focused on direct aid and how they can make an impact to a direct cause. But also there's an effort in the financial advising world to continue to look at giving as a platform for sort of planning your estate, planning the ways to have your money work to continue to increase. So when you are sitting in this moment right now where you're thinking there might be a risk of federal funding loss or there might be a shift in public perception, know that we are still seeing individuals step in and fill those gaps. And we are seeing this in, all different organizations, regardless of if it's youth serving or education or health, like regardless of the kind of organization, we are seeing individuals step in to fill that gap. But they only step in when they know they're needed. And that's a critical piece of the puzzle. If we're not communicating, if we're not sharing our story, if we're not connecting, then I think that donors wait and see. They wait to see when they're needed. In addition, we have a generational shift that is happening. We have donors that are transferring wealth at extreme volumes of rate, the largest wealth transfer ever in the history of the world. We're expecting $84 trillion to transfer from boomers to Gen X over the next decade, and it is already happening. And so that is moving wealth into a new pool of potential donors. Additionally, we're seeing that the addition of technology, like being able to click on your phone with a digital wallet, is making engagement easier, smoother, faster. We're also seeing that Gen Z, as a younger generation, is really interested in direct impact and activism. So their giving is continuing to go up, but their giving is looking a little bit different. And I'll dive into that here. But we're seeing that they often are giving around mutual aid. So crowdfunding is on the rise where an individual can indicate their need and that creates like a GoFundMe account. So giving sometimes is shifting away from institutions and more towards individuals. But I think there's still opportunity for us to think about how we engage that audience, because that younger audience, the younger donors that are participating in giving, they are really engaged in monthly giving programs. They are giving small gifts more often. They are shifting away from institutional loyalty and leaning more toward cause alignment. So we're seeing that they're no longer giving to just one organization, but giving to many causes that help them to manifest the world they want to be a part of. But this kind of work requires that we are spending some time on stewardship and connection. So hopefully you're starting to see a theme here, the ability to connect and talk to our donors, the ability to share our stories. As a Feathr user, this is where I lean into Feathr the most. This is how I think about how can I personalize my communications, segment my communications, and really make my communications relationship based, where I am telling a story that is related to that particular audience through my emails, through my advertising, through all of my outreach. That is how we're going to keep younger donors engaged and those bigger high wealth donors understanding the gaps and the needs that we have, but they're oftentimes different messages to those different donor bases. Additionally, there's a huge shift that has happened in donor advised funds. And donor advised funds have been around for a very long time. But the idea of a donor advised fund is that as a donor, I can choose to put a little bit away every paycheck or every month or every quarter to say that's my giving money. It's money that I'm setting aside in something that is a fund just for philanthropy. It is tax free, and also it has this kind of like multi-layered benefit where not only is it tax free, but it also is like compounding faster. It's earning money faster. And in that opportunity to use a donor advised fund, in the past, it has often been hard to access those funds. It's required paperwork and processing and invoicing. So from the organization to the donor advised fund, there are often multiple steps that cause friction along the way and prevent fulfillment of donation. But the shift that we're seeing now, due to the work of Chariot, who is working on a new tool called DAF Pay, is that they are making giving through a DAF very accessible by simply choosing that as your form of payment, just like choosing to pay by check or choosing to pay by credit card or choosing to pay by Apple Pay. You can now choose to pay by DAF Pay. And for me in the fundraising world, this is going to be a game changer because my big high wealth donors that pledge a large gift at an event will no longer have to have multiple steps of follow up and invoicing to be able to fulfill. Now we'll be able to access that. So technology is changing fast, and it's making a lot of big shifts in what's possible for our fundraisers out there. So I think it's important for us to understand that people are still giving. It's important for us to understand that it's becoming easier to give, that there's a lot of wealth out there for giving, and then to look at how are we building that community and bringing those folks into our sphere of influence and giving to our organizations. So as we plan for 2026, we have to ask ourselves, how are we building the relationship? How are we building the network? How are we making the connections? And most importantly, how are we making people feel a sense of belonging, that they are in this together, that they're a part of something, that they feel like this is their community, therefore this is where they give. That piece of the puzzle of having a sense of belonging is by far the most motivating thing behind the decision to give. When people feel that sense of connection, there is this powerful urgency and sense of collective action and affirmation that by giving, I can manifest the world I want to see, and I can deepen my investment in this community that I belong to. But during the pandemic, we saw that in crisis, we weren't in community. We were just dealing with crisis, and we lost our connections. We lost our sense of community. We weren't going into the workplace. We weren't seeing each other face to face. We weren't making eye contact as often. And that dramatically changes our sense of security, our sense of safety, and our ability to feel like we're a part of something. So the call to action right now in this moment as we plan for 2026 is to be thinking about how we're building our relationships with our donors, how we are gathering donors and inviting them in, and how we are sharing our message. Because when we have a community, we have a safety net around our organization. So let's first name what the problem is so we can really understand how to dive into the solutions. So right now we stand in this weird divide. There is sort of this need for fundraising, and we know that fundraising comes out of relationships and connection. And yet we're sitting at this time where we are in a connection recession, where it is defined by social scientist Robert Putnam as a time without social capital. It means we don't have our social safety nets. So we need to figure out how to build those. The connection recession is something that I want to be able to articulate, though, because I think that there's a lot of data in here for us to understand. So first, let's look at what this means for each of us. First, friendships are on the decline. You can see here a lot of information and statistics from a lot of different research studies. So let me just talk about each of these briefly. In 2021, a survey was done by the Survey Center on American Life, and 12% of Americans indicated that they had no close friends. So, right there, we already see that there's a deficit in Social Security and safety nets, but also 10 plus, um, sort of the idea of having 10 or more close friends precipitously began to decline from having a large group of friends in the 90s to having very few friends now. And so there over the past 30 years we've seen this decline in how many people have at least 10 close friends or more. Additionally, we're seeing that Harvard report has said that 21% of adults experience serious loneliness or feelings of isolation. And American Psychiatry Association reports that 30% of adults experience that loneliness weekly or daily. So we're really in this time of sort of disconnect from each other. And when we spend less time together, we have sort of less um, community that we can lean on. So, but this is affecting everyone. It's not just affecting a few people. Harvard reports that the average hours per week with friends has dropped from 6.5 hours a week to 4 hours a week, and in-person social interactions amongst teen has dropped 70% in the past 2 decades. And it's impacting men and women alike. We're seeing that 20% of single men report having no close friends. 30 to 30 age group 30 to 34-year-olds are the loneliest demographic, and 24% of adults with high school educations report having no close friends, compared to more folks reporting close friends with college educations. So this is resulting in poor health. It's resulting in all sorts of social challenges, including things like premature death risk, um, as equal to 15 cigarettes a day. That's just astounding to me. Also, the result is about 100 deaths an hour that the World Health Organization reports as directly related to loneliness or isolation. An increased risk of heart disease, stroke, dementia. So it's not a great thing. And as a nonprofit, I think we sit in this unique place where we can actually kind of be a part of that. We can be a part of the solution. We can build those communities back up. And as we do that, we become the social hub of the organization. So as we start to look at the impact on our fundraising, we see that as we've been more and more isolated, as the numbers of isolation have grown or loneliness has grown, the amount of retention of donors has decreased. And there's a direct correlation that's happening. Declining retention rates are reported by AFP, with 70% of donors giving only once and only 46% of donors retained. Social networks predict a donor's behavior, and connection influences trust, empathy, a sense of community, and investment all increase fundraising support. So, what do we do? How do we build social capital? So, building social capital is the solution, and it's the solution we all need to be focused on in our fundraising plan for 2026. Robert Putnam is a social scientist, and he dove into over 500,000 interviews in his lifetime of work here, looking at what does it mean when we participate less. And ultimately, he discovered that participating less means that we're less trusting, we're less cooperative, we're less resilient. But when we're in community, we are more trusting, we help each other more, and we get to solution faster. So social capital is the thing that has built every gathering hosted and can rebuild our communities. It is the thing that can also rebuild our fundraising funnel. So having healthier communities, happier communities means that we are more abundant in communities. And when people feel a sense of social capital, it's that sense of when we gather people, when we share stories with people, when we create and connect together, we are a part of something, and we're a part of something we give. So the call to action in all of this is, how do we gather people more often and share our stories more often? It's brain science we're talking about. And it is this idea that when people feel a sense of belonging, it isn't just something that's happening on a baseline for people. It's something that actually is created. It's a process, and it opens up possibility. But when we feel a part of something, we have all of these other benefits. We have increased safety. Our nervous system is regulated. We have a sense of identity or solutions that we can co-create quickly, and we become a part of a shared narrative together, or a shared purpose together, and we have a deeper trust. So that's foundation and partnership of investment. But how do we create belonging? We do it by sharing stories. And this is what we call belonging-based fundraising. Our challenge is keeping people in an environment where they understand who we are, but we also understand who they are, because ultimately people just want to be seen. I'm really interested in that idea of what motivates people to give and how often people choose to give. And there's some great work that's been done by Susan Howlett, a researcher at University of Washington. She's one of my favorite thought leaders in this space. And she really asked the question and did a ton of research into what is it that motivates people to take that action to the final donation. And ultimately what she found was it's not just because it's the right thing to do. Yes, they are motivated to make a difference. That is a huge driver, but there are two other major drivers, and that reflects back on community. It's to be a part of something and to be known, to be seen as generous, to be recognized for your giving. We can do this in two ways: in our marketing and messaging communications, and in our fundraising events or our gatherings. So as you plan for 2026, those are the things that I think are the most important, is how are we inviting people in and how are we telling our stories? Because when people are involved, when they feel more invested, when they're spending more time with us, their giving automatically goes up. Susan Howlett's research found that a one-time volunteer turned into an attendee of an event, turned into a donor, dramatically showed that each of those experiences increased giving. And when you have someone who is a volunteer at the board level, who is investing a lot of their time, oftentimes they're your biggest donors, because 60% of volunteers, people who give their time, also give their money because they're connected and they believe in your mission and they feel a part of something. So where do we start? Start in your data. I want to encourage you to think about, what is your data telling you? And there's 2 data points I want you to measure. The first thing I want you to measure is your dollars raised. And the second I want you to measure is your retention. I don't think we look at attention or retention enough. You want to look for patterns of where you see giving. You want to look for repeat donors, and that will indicate to you who already feels a sense of connection. So once you see patterns of giving and you see repeat donors, those are the folks that already feel a sense of connection to your community. Then I want you to look at retention and who you're losing in your giving, who hasn't given again. These are folks that feel a sense of disconnection. These are sort of 2 different segment targets for you in your marketing and communications, in your invitations, in the way that you engage them. Because those who feel a sense of belonging will increase their engagement. And you want to think about those who are already in that segment being the people that you communicate more to. I think we think, well, they're already involved, we don't need to communicate that much. No, your donors report back that they like hearing more often. Sometimes they'll close an email, or they'll miss an email in a full inbox, but hearing from us more frequently, surveying our donors, getting their feedback, scheduling time with them, those all help them to feel an even deeper investment. And then those who feel a sense of disconnect, those who are not giving again, your opportunity here is to invite them in. Invite them to volunteer days, invite them to events, invite them to come on a tour and tour your location, meet with them in person, personalize those communications, because they gave you an indication when they gave that this was a cause that they cared about. And now what you do signals back to them if you care about them. This is where I use Feathr the most right here, is how do I change the stories that I tell? And also it allows me to take an entire audience of donors and allows them to self-segment. Because when I send an email blast that has an invitation to volunteer and has an invitation to attend an event and has an invitation to donate, I can now see in Feathr who is reacting to each of those and can start to segment those audiences for automated responses that are specific to how they respond. So This is the key that I think we haven't spent much time on in the nonprofit sector before. We've talked about audience segmentation, but automating that audience segmentation is new as technology has developed. And this is the first sort of step to thinking about how we rebuild community and connection for our nonprofits. The second thing I want to focus on with those retention rates, though, is that often we get stuck in this idea of acquiring new donors, right? Another consultant we work with, Amy Varga, who we love, calls it acquisition addiction. This idea that I need more donors, I need to get more people involved. It's true, we love the first time donor, but the first time gift is always the lowest. So when folks give for the first time and they don't know your organization, they're simply indicating something to you. Yeah, I'm interested. This is something that's valuable to me. But what you do next is the game changer. So if you were to focus your team's attention just in the first quarter of 2026 on what is our process with first time donors and what do we do when we receive a first time gift, that could shift everything for you, because there is a lot of research that shows that when we shift our focus into getting away from getting new donors and instead to retaining donors, that that additional gift secured within 6 weeks yields a lifetime donor. So if we have an individual make a first time gift and we follow up with them and they give again within 6 weeks, that is an indication that they feel like they belong and they feel like this is their organization. And 84% of donors that give a second gift within 6 weeks are retained as lifetime donors. Because the important thing there is that they gave you an indication that they were interested. You brought them in and invited them to be a part of the work. And now they're willing to make their big investment and be a part of this work for the long term. So when you finish a campaign or event, we often get to the end and think, oh my God, thank God we're done. I'm so tired. But this is when the real work has to start. That's when we have to actually think about our gratitude process. We have to think about the immediate receipts, and then we have to think about how we report out. We have to think about how we're stewarding our donors and how we're bringing them along in our storytelling and connecting with them. There's a philosophy in the marketing world that has been around for quite some time that we need to connect to people 7 or 8 times before they take action. And in the past 5 years, we've seen that because of the sort of attention economy and how much input and information we're receiving, that we actually have to connect with them more like 12 to 15 times. And I'm testing that actually right now with an organization who's in the middle of an end of year campaign, and they're sending out multiple emails alongside of multiple advertising campaigns segmented for a total of 3 different audiences. And a shout out to Feathr, because Feathr is the reason why we're able to do this. But with one email, we are able to track who was most engaged in giving, who didn't fulfill their donation but clicked on it and expressed interest, and who clicked on the story that we were sharing of a client, an impact story. I don't want to disclose details of the story, but the client story of the impact that the organization was having, so that we could then set up an automated campaign around how do they then get 15 touches associated with the thing that they just expressed interest in. So we launched the campaign with the idea of we're going to research our audience and segment our audience. And then we're going to divide, as a result of that campaign, how we continue the conversation. And one of the things that we learned really quickly was a lot of people were interested in volunteering. And volunteer programs for this organization went away during COVID. And so they had a few volunteer opportunities, but this became a focus area for them very quickly to understand in 2026 we need to build more volunteer opportunities for our organization. So they're evaluating right now where they have opportunities to invite people in to be a part of their work. But the other thing that they found was when they shared the story, they engaged a lot of their renewing donors. So a lot of folks who had given previously, that story motivated them to make a second donation. And so that event moment, that storytelling moment, the opportunity for them to understand impact yielded a return of support. And it's because story is a really powerful tool. And I want to talk about kind of your brain on story and the implication of story, as well as what story we should be telling. So, first of all, story is our biggest tool of connection. Our brains are literally hardwired to learn through story. I don't know if you're like me. I sit in a restaurant and I see what other people are doing, and I automatically start to fill in a story. Oh, they're on a first date. Oh, that dinner is not going well. Oh, they have a big family reunion going on. I don't know if these are really happening, but my brain fills in the gaps. It's a natural thing that our brain does to make sense of the world, because story is literally how we process the world around us, and it is a way for us to be able to understand or comprehend what our environment is, what we care about, sort of what our values are, but also to just observe the world. So there was a study that was done at the University of London to understand the biological implication that occurred during story, and they connected an audience that was watching a play to heart rate monitors and brainwave monitors. And they discovered that what happened very quickly was, as they were watching the play in a group, side by side, shoulder to shoulder, their heart rate synced up. And it would increase at the same rate and decrease at the same rate. And if they knew people in the audience, if they were there with a friend or if they were there on a date, that heart rate sync continued into the intermission, meaning they had an emotional response that stayed with them and they stayed synced up through the conversation at intermission. And the scientific basis here is this idea that when we experience story live together, with people, shoulder to shoulder, it has a bigger impact that can literally transform us. And so I think about that. Like, what is the power of inviting people into an event for our organization and sharing our story and having 300 people all witness that together? Dr. Paul Zak, who's a research scientist that dives into neuroscience, he has a book called Immersion that dives deep into this idea of what yields a great experience that ultimately yields action. Like, how do we persuade people to become a buyer of our product or to become a donor to our cause? And what he learned was, rarely are we able to persuade. Often it's simply speaking to those sort of brain connections that we have. And one of those critical elements is that when we are experiencing story together, we often make similar decisions as the other people around us. Additionally, there is the part of the brain that processes decision making. So Simon Sinek has done work on this where he's looked at, we have 3 parts of the brain. The middle of our brain processes why. That's where we start to like answer questions about belief and what our values are. And that why, when you say, well, why does this matter? Why is this important? We believe in, that's also where we make our decisions from. But so often we tap into the outer areas of the brain, the neocortex areas that are very rational and analytical, and they look at the how and the what. So sometimes we tell our story by saying we're a 501c3 and we have 14 programs we offer youth. And we're talking to the what and the how where people don't make decisions from. And so we never move that narrative for them. But when we talk to the why, we believe that all youth in our community deserve a safe place to learn and thrive. Fulfilling that statement, we believe, that taps right into the decision-making part of the brain. So when we start to think about the stories we're sharing and how we're going to rebuild community and connection to our cause, we have to find our stories that exemplify why our work matters. Now, oftentimes I see organizations tell lots of stories, meaning list their programs and list their resources, and that's the how. It's not the why. But there was another research that was done by Dr. Paul Slovic that looked at a case study where he was looking at food insufficiency in a community. And he made the case that there was a single child who was impacted who, because of the work of a organization, no longer was experiencing food insecurity. And then he made the case of the 14,000 children living in that community that were experiencing food insecurity. And he assumed that the bigger case study would yield bigger support. And what he found very quickly was, no, quite the opposite. The single story yielded the most support because the single story spoke to our need to walk in someone else's shoes through story. And when you told her story, it was a personal experience that we could relate to, even if we had never experienced food insecurity. But additionally, it spoke to us from a perspective of if $1 could make a difference, $10 could make a bigger difference, and $100 could transform her life. So people were compelled by the single story to give more. As soon as you entered the bulk into the picture, 14,000 kids suffering from food insecurity in our community, the question became, I am not rich. I cannot solve this problem. Why even give? But also, the brain activation was different. When you spoke to the single story, you spoke right here to the why and the decision-making part of the brain. When you spoke to the many, you started to speak to process and rationale. And the second that a statistic was entered into the picture, combined, this is her story, but she's one of 14,000 children impacted, giving dropped by half because it moved us out of our decision-making part of the brain. So when we share our stories through our marketing and through our gatherings, we want those stories to speak to the why, and we want them to be single stories of impact. And when I say single stories, one unit, as my friend Tyrion Koshi says, he's like, one unit. It could be a family, it could be a person, it could be a pet, it could be a classroom, it could be an orca, whatever your mission is and who you serve, but one story that allows someone to go through a journey and isn't just a list of programs. Because when we share those, we immediately connect people to that decision-making part of their brain. But then when they experience those stories together, side by side, shoulder to shoulder, as Paul Zak says, we experience something that Emile Durkheim, a French philosopher, calls collective effervescence. And the idea of collective effervescence is that when we unify as a group, we will always be bigger than an individual can manifest. So our impact will be bigger, the results will be bigger, what we can do collectively will be bigger. And that comes from experiencing stories in community and taking action together. So the neuroscience behind this moment when we create something that is bigger than any of us and more powerful than any of us and a better solution in the world to address our mission, we have two elements that are happening in our bodies. First, there's something called mirror neurons. Mirror neurons is what creates contagion, right? Like when an idea becomes contagious, it is that thing that we experience together. When our brains sync up and our heart rates sync up, there's this profound impact where when you show one person doing something or you show one person's emotional journey, there's like this energy ripple that occurs through the room. And it speaks directly to why in-person fundraising, like an event, is such a powerful moment, is that we can actually replicate that feeling. And then when one person gives, it's more likely that other people around them will give. So if I'm in a room and I'm sitting at a table and the person across from me gives, it is likely that I will join them because I have these mirror neurons in my body that are responding to the environment I'm in and replicating that world. But the other thing that's happening is a release of hormones in my body. So what Paul Zak calls the moral molecule, dopamine and oxytocin are released. And oxytocin is this magic moral molecule that the second it is released, we are looking to be a part of a solution. We are on the search to be involved in something as a solution to the world. And when we have oxytocin going in the body, giving increases 2 to 3 times and giving frequency increases. So when we have oxytocin going, I may receive a letter at home and say, yeah, that's a cause I care about. That's great. But when I'm in a group and I see other people giving and I'm excited about this and I've just experienced something that has collective effervescence that's bigger than me alone, now not only am I likely to give once, I'm likely to give more and I'm likely to give multiple times. So all of a sudden, there's this amplification that can happen through raising money together, sharing stories together. And I'm not the only one diving into this idea of behavioral science and neuroscience. There's a lot of great thought leaders out there with incredible books that I recommend that you check out. But Paul Zach's Immersion has a lot of tools in it that I pull forward often to think about how do we move people to act. There are two other new books out. Tammy Zonker is looking at human design and how that moves giving. And Chirian Koshi's book, just released today, Neurogiving, I had the joy of being able to get an early copy, really looks at all of the research and science behind all of the brain activity and biology and psychology that's at play in engaging donors to participate in our mission and to care about the work we do. So lots of great thought behind this, but something that really pulls to the top for me is in Paul Zach's work of immersion. And he shares this idea that there are 5 key things that if our brain experiences all of those in an experience together, so whether I'm coming into your office to volunteer, or I am in person getting a tour of your mission, or I'm out in the community volunteering for you, or I'm at a gala event or a walk, whatever my connection point is to you, if I am experiencing your organization and these 5 things are present, my satisfaction goes up, my engagement goes up, my investment goes up, my giving goes up. If not, if these things are not present, oftentimes these are the things that people say, I don't know, it wasn't worth my time. So I want to just lightly touch on each of these things. There's a much deeper dive we can do, and I have podcasts and webinars galore that can share them with you. But the first thing when you are gathering people around your mission is you have to have some staging that prepares them to understand this is a fundraising event. That means, 1, they should be on the list so that when they arrive, they are expected. You should have pre-event communications that go out to them. All of your marketing should have been clear that it was a fundraising event. And when they get there, there should be clear signage and it should be easy to navigate. That staging tells your brain, pay attention. You can relax. This is good. It's easy. Now pay attention. If I were to show up to your event and it was this like beautiful farm to table dinner on a farm and I was wearing high heels and I couldn't navigate the ground and the like bumpy, uneven earth, I might not stay and participate. So staging basically says you have everything you need to participate, and by doing that, you are safe to pay attention. Second thing we need is immersion. This means stories. We need to be able to connect to people by telling the stories of the work that we do. And oftentimes we spend our valuable time with our donors talking about all of our partners and talking about all of their stories, but we need to tell our stories. Because when we tell our stories, it tells our brain this is valuable, pay attention. Then it has to be relevant, meaning something that sticks, something that's important, that is of value. Relevance often comes with, is this a single or is this many stories? Are you speaking to the why or are you speaking to the whole? If you're speaking to the individual story and you're speaking to the why, oftentimes it means it's shareable. I can leave that event and tell other people about it. The 4th thing you need is target, which is people of influence. This means a host committee that's welcoming people, a board that's acting like the hosts of the event and connecting to people and talking to people, folks that raise their paddle at the beginning of an event or fulfill that pledge or step up and say all match giving, so that there is a level of influence that tells people you can trust this organization and there are people here to influence that action. And the 5th thing is action. You have to have a call to action. If you don't have a call to action that says give, sign up, participate, volunteer, something that allows people to be a part of the solution, if all they've heard is the problem and they don't have a way to be a part of the solution, their investment goes down, their connection goes down, their satisfaction goes down. Because when you have an action that they can take, it creates relief in the brain. These are the 5 things that are the most important when you gather people together. And if you do it well, if you do all those things and bring people together in a way that they feel ready to be a part of a fundraising event, stories that are connective, people that are giving and showing up, it tells your audience this is worth trusting and worth being a part of. And it builds for your brain relief in that tension of what's expected of me, and instead says, just be a part of it. The other thought leader that is so powerful when you think about how to build connection and safety networks around your event is Priya Parker with The Art of Gathering. And the thing Priya Parker taught me was that instead of designing our events from the perspective of how many people are attending and how much money are we raising, we build our events with the idea of what impact could we have by all these people coming together. So we ask ourselves, why are we having this event? And we ask ourselves to define it in a way that focuses on our mission. So to close, I want to give you a case study of what that looks like when it's done well. We partnered with an organization called Community Warehouse. Community Warehouse is a furniture bank for folks who have previously experienced or been unhoused or experienced lack of access to housing. And when they move into their house, by providing household goods, they are more likely to stay in that house. They are more likely to remain in their home. And the unique story that they tell frequently is that they have a warehouse that they fill and empty every day. That idea that there's enough in this world that people fill their warehouse and there's enough need in this world that it empties every single day is a powerful story that they share with the community. But they have 2 needs that are the most important needs, and that is mattresses are the biggest request that they get, and everyday household goods like silverware is the second largest request that they get. So their annual event was an event called the Chair Affair, where they were taking furniture out of the warehouse and partnering with artists to have the artists reimagine them as art. But the problem was with this was that it was in contrast to their mission. It took a usable object out of circulation, out of the hands of a client, and turned it into an art piece. And it wasn't a very practical thing. So donors would maybe buy one chair, but not the next year buy another. So they asked the question of what's possible by bringing people together. We brainstormed ideas to reinforce the mission, and ultimately identified that we needed people to understand the impact that household goods have. And that was why we're going to bring people together. And those were the stories we were going to share. So instead, they partnered with their artists first to design chairs that would go back into the community as children's chairs in homes, and offered for their guests to be able to sponsor those chairs. So now it came to the child with a note on it that said, "This is a gift to you from our donor," with the donor's name. They moved their event into a warehouse space. So they moved out of the ballroom and moved into a very hip, cool warehouse, and designed the space to feel like you were at a special experience, but really played into the warehouse idea. They also designed their marketing materials to convey a feeling of gifting. That Tiffany blue box became an element that represented gifting, that we are filling people's homes with gifts. And all of the event decor tied into that idea of gifting. The Chair Affair theme continued throughout, but we really tried to elevate the Chair Affair to think of it as more than just repurposing a chair. Additional to this, we had things like a silent auction where there were unique gifts or gift boxes to reinforce that idea of gifting. We had really functional furniture like a dresser that was used for a dresser pull, where people pulled for a chance to win something. So they would pick a drawer and pull it and see what they won. That was inside the drawer is all gift cards. And they pulled that Tiffany blue color through the entire event to really elevate the feeling of what they were trying to accomplish when they go into someone's home with new furniture. They also, because they're in a warehouse, had 2 loading bays. So they backed up their big community warehouse trucks into the loading bays. So as people entered, they had to walk by the trucks that said community warehouse on the side. And in those trucks, they staged one as an unfurnished home and one as a furnished home, using the same trope across both of them of a small stuffed bunny to represent the feeling and the representation of what a home is like unfurnished versus furnished. They then gave people the opportunity to shop in the same way that they would shop using an iPad in the store. They walked people through the process so they could experience and connect to their mission. The biggest thing that they get a lot of requests for are those household goods. And so they served dinner with something missing. Can you tell it's missing on this table? There's no silverware. They wanted to make a point, so they brought soup to the table with no silverware. And when they opened the program, they said, "Do you notice anything missing?" Just around the time people were literally like looking and trying to get the attention of their server. They explained that this was the number one item that people request, and it's because it allows them to have the dignity of a meal. And so tonight, the silverware that our servers are bringing you is going to be cleaned and donated back to the warehouse. So it brought them closer to mission. But then those centerpieces also were filled with everyday household goods like alarm clocks and simple tool sets that help people to make their house a home. And they asked everyone to participate in buying these as welcome baskets for their community that they were serving. And they sold over 900 welcome baskets that night. So when they had purpose and a single story to center around, they were able to do the thing that we should all be focusing on, which is building donor connections, allowing that moment where people are connecting to you and to each other, so that there is a community created by your gatherings, by your storytelling. Have stories that create that sense of connection to mission with a seated, focused audience that can pay attention. You will never get the oxytocin release if you don't have a seated audience that is participating and paying attention. And an immersive story that really centers your work, your mission, not other organizations, but the work that you do. And above all, it has to have joy. When you have joy and surprise and delight, the lean in, the engagement, the participation, we often think that our stories need to create a tear or yield a teary response. And that's not true. We have over 300 emotions we feel. Our stories can yield a sense of nostalgia, a sense of excitement, and joy is a powerful emotion. But when we have that call to action, that call to action is collective confirmation. That call to action says, I am a part of this. I am giving to this group because it's important to me, but also I am the kind of person that does good things. So my call to you and my encouragement to you is that as you look ahead to 2026, I want you to think about how you're building your community through two means. How are you marketing and telling your story? And how are you gathering people? Because those two pieces, and a gathering doesn't just have to be a gala event like this picture. Gathering can be having your board meeting in person instead of over Zoom. A gathering can be inviting a donor into your event. But those two pieces alone will be the thing that most impacts the strength and security of our organizations. So as we go through this time of connection recession, I encourage you to think about developing your plans for the year ahead, focused on how we're inviting people in. And if you need help doing that, we have lots of resources for you for free. So join us on Substack. We publish best practice articles and tools and how-tos all the time. And our weekly podcast has lots of great resource and advice from other thought leaders on how to do the same. So I'm going to invite Isa back and open it up. We have just a couple minutes left, and I want to make sure if there were questions. I tried to watch the chat and answer a few questions along the way, but if there are any questions, I want to make sure to leave a little room for any questions that came up.
Absolutely. First of all, on behalf of everybody, thank you, Sam. This was super inspiring. I feel like you do such a wonderful job of using the data and the science to back the things you're saying, but you're also so clearly tapped into the human component of what you do and put your heart into the work that you do with these orgs. So that all comes through and creates just a really, really great experience, learning experience. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I always feel like
Yeah.
the data allows us to be better people.
For sure, for sure. Real quick before people start trickling out, I'm going to run a quick poll just to see if anyone would like to learn more about either Swaim strategies or the Feathr platform or both. So go ahead and answer this quick poll for me, and we'll get you hooked up with somebody who can walk you through one or both of these services and platforms. So, yeah, again, thank you. If anyone has any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat, and we can get to those now. But yeah, one of the things I wanted to kind of double down on one of the things that you said that I thought was really interesting and came up actually at Nonprofit Storytelling Conference. So I had the pleasure of spending some time in person with Sam recently at that conference. And I heard this come up in a couple of sessions, but this tendency that nonprofits have to feel like they need to make their case, right? And
Right.
overeducate and talk about all of the facts about their mission and everything they're doing. Like you said, 14 programs in however many counties. And I think that that can be overbearing and overwhelming for people. You only have a couple seconds to catch their attention. And that isn't tapping into that why, right? That part of the brain that you were talking about. So I think if you can kind of figure out your why or the emotional storytelling thing that you want to tap into and lead with that, people will buy in without you having to make a case. And then you kind of, the how and the what sort of fall in line after that. And you can provide that information for them about where to give and how and make it easy and make recurring donations easy, but just leading with the thing that's going to really get them motivated and
And I'm guessing that some folks on the call today are Feather users. If they're a Feather user, the best way to do that is through A/B testing. So being able to run a campaign where you have multiple messages and stories, I guarantee you, if you need to prove to a board member or an executive director that listing your 14 programs is not valuable, do that in a campaign and also run alongside of it a story of impact. And you will see that there is a difference. And you will be able to walk into your next meeting and say, this is why.
yep. Another question I had for you is that I hear sometimes mixed things about needing to include impact statements and stats and things like that on ads just to like drive credibility or trust, especially among younger donors who maybe don't have that trust in institutions. And if you lead with like the storytelling or the emotions, they might be like, well, how can I trust this? So I know
Mm-hmm.
like impact reports are a great way to build trust, but I'm curious if you have any recommendations around creating that sense of trust in the organization while still leading with the kind of emotional storytelling.
Well, it's interesting because when you're talking about ads or you're talking about something that they're going to see quickly, rarely do people engage because of a stat. That should be in your report out, right? Like your post donation. Thank you. Here's the impact you're having, and here's the stats about that impact. That's not what draws them in. You want the thing that you share first to be the thing that's going to get them to look for more and inquire more. But the thing that builds trust the fastest is actually other people. So,
Yeah.
other people giving, if I click to donate and there is no thermometer and there is no progress, or there's a thermometer with no progress, it says to me, no one's donating. Why is no one donating?
Mhm.
Distrust. And I hold back. The second I click and I see progress, I'm like, oh, other people are giving too. I want to be a part of this. Let me jump in the mix. So, other people are the fastest way to build trust. I usually will work with an organization to make sure that they have a couple of pre committed gifts that are preceded, not fake money, but people who give before a campaign or before an event or before a marketing push, so that when they click, they're not the first one, they're not the only, right? And that, I think, is the fastest way to build trust.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Um, Kind of building the trust once they've opted in during the giving
Exactly.
process. Yep.
Yeah, that organization I shared, Community Warehouse, the storyline that they use most in their marketing that I think is so compelling are they sort of personify the impact of the furniture with things like story time is better with a bed,
Hmm.
or dinner around the table is better with the table.
Yeah.
So that you're thinking about the impact that those things have. That's a really compelling, like, click in and learn more. um, the reporting, the statistics, that should be something I can find, but not in the like reason why I'm inviting someone in.
Yep.
I should say rarely. Once in a while, there's a statistic that's just mind blowing and it's worth leading with, but only
Yeah.
if it's truly mind blowing. Like, last year we had a 400% increase of impact in our community or something, but only if it's truly a number that is like, whoa, how'd they do
Mhm.
that?
Right. Right. And I even heard in one of the sessions, I think it was Steve Screen's session, that it's better to lead if you're going to lead with a stat or something, you should lead with the need and not with like the success
Hmm.
cases if it's a direct response sort of appeal, right? You don't want to be telling people, hey, this is how successful we've been, because then there isn't really a
Right.
challenge that people feel like they need to step in and help solve. So remembering to lead with the need and don't ever feel like you're going too heavy on that because the need is there. And then keep the focus on one thing, so like you said, the one unit, one person, one family, but also one kind of piece of information, right? You don't want to
Yeah.
be saying, this is the need, and this is also what we've solved in the last year, thanks to you. You kind of isolate those messages, the thank yous and the impact have a place. But when you're trying to get people to give you their money, you have to lead with the need and yeah, make them feel like they're contributing to something.
Yeah.
Um, all right. Well,
Thank you.
looks, yeah, thank you so much. And thanks to everyone for joining. And like I said earlier, we'll be sending out the deck and the recording, so you'll get that in your email inbox. But yeah, thanks again so much, Sam. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thank you. And I hope everyone has a great holiday and launches into 2026 focused on building community.
Yep. All righty. Take
Bye,
care.
everyone.